That's very nice of you, Dan. Can I just check you can see my screen with me and Claire on it?
I can, mate. Yeah. Oh, that's
Wonderful.
good.
Okie doke. Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you, the Edinburgh branch. Fantastic branch, very supportive of everybody. And Dan requested I do my best to get through ISO 45001 in a one, and it's quite difficult. You can see the standard there. My name's Andy Prother. That's my dog, Llewellyn. Anybody knows me, got to know my dog. I'm the Director of Risk and Resilience for PCR Global, but also I'm the developer at Fit for Purpose, is a branch of PCR Global, where we're trying to put presentations together like you're going to get today and make it simple. So that's really what we're trying to do. I'm a fellow of IOSH, a very, very proud fellow of IOSH, fellow of IRSM, and also a fellow of the Institute of Leadership, and all those go together. On your screen, you can see Health and Safety Management, ISO 45001. I'm also a UCAS certification auditor for a certification body, and I do a lot of high threat. I travel to a lot of high threat areas. I say threat because threat has intent. I was security before I was safety. And today I'm going to take you through this standard. Before we go through this, the sort of the main clauses, it's really important to understand occupational health and safety risk management. I'm going to go through these slides quite quickly. It is quite a lot, okay? However, what I'm delivering now is actually a course, and this will be online in a week or two. But it's really important that we understand what health and safety risk management is as well. Risk disciplines, we can see quality, safety, environment, information, security, business continuity, and we can probably find a few more as well. But occupational health and safety risk management is one of those disciplines, and the standard talks about threats and opportunities. It does talk about hazards, of course, but threats and opportunities are really important because that's part of enterprise risk management. And anybody who knows ISO 31000, they will be familiar with the terms threats and opportunities. What we're looking for is organizational resilience. And you can see a number of times there I'm saying, look, these British standards or these ISOs exist for all of this. And I'm very, very interested in these ISO standards. I think they're really, really good. Crisis management. This is what we're trying to keep away from, a crisis. We do not want to be in a crisis. So it's important that we do understand and consider these wider standards, because horizon scanning, that's quality, that's risk, that's safety, that's security. We don't want to come off the rails. We do not want to have a train crash. We do not want any directors jailed for exposing people to asbestos. Top management must look at horizon scanning, the quality policy. The quality policy leads into the health and safety policy. This is all quality. Think about this. Safety is part of delivering a service. Of course, it's health and safety, but it's part of delivering a service. On all roads, whether it's quality, safety, business continuity, it's going to go back to that risk assessment, and it's going to go back to your internal auditing capability. So that's just an introduction, a very, very quick introduction into occupational health and safety risk management, which is a risk discipline alongside the others we've just looked at. We're now moving into the standard itself. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elements of the harmonized structure, what used to be known as the high-level structure. We're going to try and get through all of these, get to about 45 minutes, and then hopefully have time for some questions as well. Context. Context is absolutely critical. Context comes with a number of important clauses. Really, really does. And ultimately, context of the organization. What is that? It's the situation the organization exists in to operate, regardless of industry. Regardless of industry, it's really important to understand no organization operates in a vacuum. And we've got those three contexts. ISO talks about a number of contexts, but ISO 31000 starts bringing in the risk management context, and so should we. The internal context, that's where we aim to seek to achieve our objectives. The external context, where we seek to achieve our objectives. And the risk management context is an amalgam of all of this. And look inside vision, mission, values, strategy, objectives. You can't touch this, you can't kick this, but you can feel it. The context is virtually your culture as well when we think about that. Back to the standard. Do we need to document anything for context? No, we don't. But if we don't, we can have an issue, right? I always document, and auditors expect it. You don't have to do it. But ultimately, if you do document your context like we do, then ultimately it gives you something really good to go back to in the future. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, political, economical, social, technical, legal, environmental. We can do all that risk management stuff by documenting our context properly, not just for the auditor. We need to look at those internal and external issues, swap pestle, look at those needs and interests of workers and interested parties, the scope, and then we've got to put that management system in. This is context. I can't tell you how important this clause is, but it only becomes that important when you really understand it. Right at the very start, it's easy to look over it. 4.3, scope. Have we got to document anything? Absolutely, or scope. And this is where these documents start coming in to support us. Physical boundary, functional boundary, and the authority over what we can control and influence. That's really important. So we've got to determine the boundaries. We've got to consider our external and internal context for our scope. We've got to consider our interested parties, and we've got to consider our work-related activities. And we really can do that quite well if we document it properly, not a wasted document. Our system must include any activity, produce, or service within our control. Really important. That scope is, I can't tell you what, I'm going to say it again. It's so critical. When you're setting up your system, make sure, or you're dealing with other people, other organizations, make sure you're aware of their scope of service and their geographical scope as well. Things can go wrong pretty quickly if you're bringing somebody on board and their scope does not cover what you want them for. So it's important to understand that scope of service and scope of geographical location. This is the last clause for context, and we've whizzed through that. It's the smallest clause, 4.4, and that's it. But it's got the largest coverage. And why is that? Because ultimately, your occupational health and safety management system covers those 7 elements that we're going to go through today. Context, leadership, planning, support, operations, performance, evaluation, and improvement. It's going to cover all of them. That's why this clause is the most important. And historically, when I've had to give out major non-conformities, if you're raising a major non-conformity at 4.4, it's because some big things are broken within here. That's the problem. We're on to leadership. So we've done the context, and this is a bit of a journey, isn't it? Right, what are we? What do we do? Do we climb trees because we're an arborist? No. Do we operate security procedures, cyber? No. Decide what you do. Once you know what you do, then we can continue on the journey. So then we need leadership and worker participation. Interestingly, out of the main ISOs, that this leadership clause is different, and worker participation, legal requirement in the UK, as we know, but it's emphasized there on the heading of the clause, leadership and worker participation. So what we're looking at, commitment, policy, roles, consultation. So we can see 3 areas in here where things are going to be documented. And the big leadership and commitment one there, it just relates to many of the other clauses. First and foremost, that policy. This is one of the most important documents in an organization. This is the intent. I don't mean the statement of intent, because that's just one part, isn't it? This is the intent of that organization to manage risk, occupational health and safety risk. 3 parts, written if 5 or more, as we know. It's good to have a manual, I personally think, and we're going to have that statement of intent inside it. The occupational health and safety policy is one of, if not the most important documents. And every time I do my audits, I'm digging into that policy. And there's usually a finding that relates back to the policies, because that's where you say who is doing what in your responsibilities. And that's where you say who's responsible for what, I should say. And then arrangements is when you're saying what people are doing. So it's a really important clause, and we could dig into that all day. Think about this leadership. Think about where we are within our organization. Leadership. How do we lead for health and safety? We've got to ensure things are done. That is it. Top management have to reach organizational resilience, or at least want to reach, no matter what organization or industry you're in. What we want to try and do is remember that health and safety policy. There's a lot of responsibility going on within our organizations. That policy is critical. And we lead by the direction that's within the policy. We're directed by that policy. We've got to go back to it. Look at the responsibilities, the roles and responsibilities under this clause. Competent advice, risk assessment, consultation, training. If you're in construction, you've got to understand all of that. Contractor due diligence, incident investigation, very importantly, health surveillance and emergency response plan. All of the hazards we may have. And then we've got to consider happy staff, because that's what we want. All roads are going to go back to that risk assessment, and we need to audit all of this and make sure we keep our eyes out for those misleaders, those bad leaders. Directed by the policy, roles and responsibilities covers the majority of this. Really important that we focus on that health and safety policy. Really important. So that leadership, within that clause still, roles, responsibilities and authorities. Do we have a document for it? It's worth having. Do we need one? No, we don't. I always guide clients to have one. Why? Because it gives us something to go back to, something to review, something to guide the rest of the team. And if somebody leaves the organization, business continuity, you've got this in place. The RACI matrix is a free one on the Fit for Purpose website. I use this document all of the time when I'm supporting and trying to get an organization, trying to support an organization to understand where it is. That RACI matrix, really important. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed. Put everything down the left-hand side that you want, that needs doing, and then cross-check it against the names at the top. So this clause is really important. Consultation as well. We can see it. Participation. Do we have a document on it? I would get one. I would get one, and I would say what we're doing. We know there's a legal requirement in the UK to consult. We know there's two main pieces of legislation in and around consultation. We must do it. And as we go through these slides, you'll see a lot of consultation. I'm going to show you, I don't usually do this, but we're going to show you how we do it here at PCR. Planning, context, leadership. We know who we are. We've got a good team at the top. We know we've got roles and responsibilities. We've got a good policy. Right, what are we going to do next? We're going to plan. Right. What is planning about? Planning is about risk, isn't it? Of course it is. Planning is about the risk assessment methodology, legal requirements, and planning action and objectives. Really important planning. If you don't plan, you're going to fail. It is as simple as that. Planning and the facts of history. I've always said this. People have heard me say this before since I got blowed up for the last time. But ultimately, a plan is nothing. It is the planning that is key. Absolutely key. If you don't plan for what you're doing and it goes wrong, then there's an issue. Planning is massively linked to clause 8.2, which is emergency preparedness and response as well. We need to be fit for purpose. And we only do that through planning. And that's the health and safety risk assessment, isn't it? Right? We've got to identify those hazards, observation, what type of technique we're using, who's going to be harmed. That's what we've got to think about, isn't it? Vulnerable workers. Many things in here that we can see. Contractors. How might they be harmed? We're going to look at those categories. Okay, IOSH categories, we know it gets broken down, but let's be honest, mechanical, physical, it gives us something to go on, but it's not splitting it down. We need to split it down, as the IOSH courses do, but we need these type of categories: noise, vibration, radiation, mental ill health, violence. Really important, but remembering there are no universally agreed categories. We're then going to evaluate those controls. We've got to think of the three we've obviously got your reasonably practicable, the duties, the three main duties. We've got to think about those. We'll cover that a little bit more in depth. Safe place, safe person. We're evaluating those controls. We're recording if we've got 5 or more, and we're involving the management in our risk assessment. For ISO, we do risk assessment right across the board, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Hazard identification, something good for us. PME, I guide companies, people, equipment, materials, and environment. Get yourself a hazard checklist. If it's a specific checklist, it really helps across the organization. Really good to have a hazard identification checklist. Really important. And this is the big one. It really is the big one. This is your risk assessment methodology, which most companies could do with some improvement on. The standard once it's documented. How you document is up to you, but ultimately you can see what I've got. I've got multiple risk assessment methodologies, what legal and other requirements when completed, and right at the end, the minimum competence requirements for undertaking those risk assessments, knowledge and experience, and the training. What do you need to do a CPP, a construction phase plan, a RAMS, a pregnancy risk assessment, of course, and so on and so forth. The risk assessment methodology is, with the policy and the risk assessment and the objectives, which we'll cover, by far the most important documents in the organisation. Let's not forget the health risk assessment methodology. Legal requirement, yet again, top management, legal and other requirements. We're dipping into another clause, but that's fine. All roads go back to that risk assessment. And then we're looking at things like your stresses, demand control. We know the HSE management standards, hazardous substance, noise, vibration, and all the other things that come with it. Do we need health surveillance? Our risk assessment methodology, as dictated by the policy, will tell us. The policy is absolutely critical for the arrangement. And again, are we getting competent advice for that? Really, really important. Really important. We're moving on now to determination of legal and other requirements. Is it worth having a document? It is definitely worth having a guidance document. Think about this. We've got multiple organizations out there who are going to sell us updates, and that's fine. But hang on, that's only an update. This standard wants us to evaluate our compliance against that update, and we've jumped ahead to performance evaluation, clause 9. Because that's needed. In clause 9, we are reviewing what we've documented. If any of you are really quick readers, you will see there's a few things wrong in here. It's wrong because this is part of the training we do for internal auditing. But ultimately, this is where it generally ends up with people in some type of legal register. But the key is not the legal register, it's the analysis and the assessment and the evaluation of how you are actually complying with those laws. So you can see here, this is good. This is good juju here. Yes, we got an internal audit report on our risk assessment methodology, and that was undertaken there. So if I'm auditing this company, I'm going to go, yes, that's good. If we get into this, no, we're not. We know that's wrong. And there's a couple of other things wrong in here as well. But legal and other requirements, they're going to catch us later on. Objectives. Again, think about it, the policy, the risk assessment methodology, and the objectives are going to tell us what we're going to do. Really important. Objectives and planning to achieve them. Are we going to have a document? I'm going to have a document, and I'm going to set objectives at strategic, tactical, and operational level. That way, I can give ownership to people. There's going to be a process. I'm going to be saying who is doing what, and I'm going to be using SMART objectives. And think about it, bang, we've hit another clause, responsibilities. There it is, roles, responsibilities, and authorities. So ultimately, what you should be noticing, this is not a standard full of individual clauses. Most of these clauses overlap. When we're smart with this standard, we know where they overlap, and we build somebody's management system to suit. Otherwise, we're going to have endless streams of documents and loads of work that just does not need to be done. Take this, for instance. This is our internal process for our risk management consultants. Health surveillance, HSG 47, manual handling, quick hitches, site induction, Martin's Law. Everything is in here to give guidance to the consultants. So what am I doing? Planning. I'm leading. We're risk evaluating. We're training. We're covering all of these. And we've got records and evidence to show it. It's really important. Still within that document, I'm showing the staff, showing the guys, showing the clients what to do and how to do it. I'm not trying to chase ISO around to get ISO. I'm just managing my organization. And then we're going to hit context, leadership. We're going to hit planning. We're going to hit multiple other standards by communicating. It's so important, communication through training. We're going to operations, performance evaluation, how you set your standard up. You know, if you can kill, bear with me, somebody wants to come in. Oh. If you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, well done. If you can kill multiple birds with 1 stone, even better. That's what we want to be doing. We need to be smart with the standard. So what do? We know the organization we are. We got some leadership and involvement. We got the policy. We got the risk assessments. Now we've got our planning. We've got our objectives. We know where we're going now. Right. So what do we need now? Some support. What does that mean? People internally, people externally, documentation. Nice and easy. It's a journey. Let's have a look at this support then. Support, resources, training and awareness, comms, internal, external, and good document control. Really important. Support. Are we going to have a document? Yes, we are. Do we need one? No, we don't. But we are going to say how we do it, and we're going to say who is responsible. And that way we satisfy multiple other clauses, but we also guide our teams so they know what they're doing. Remember, one of the stresses under the 6 management standards for stress is role. And the majority of people are not that clear on their role. We've got to get those competent people, buildings, vehicles, who's responsible for safety, calibrated equipment. So support is coming in an awful lot. Competence, training, and awareness. Are we going to have a document? Yes, we are. Communication, a document? Yes, we do. Control of doc information? Yes, we do. Training, worker consultation, and we've got records to show all of this. So we should be able, by keeping it simple, because half the organizations are already doing this stuff. It's just somebody will come in and give you a ton of documents, and then everybody gets confused because you've now got a Porsche when you didn't need a Porsche. Really important. One of the most important activities in an organization. So I'm going to show it again. We don't do this usually, but I'm going to show you now how we do it for people. And I'm showing you because it'll all start coming together now. M-Plant Hire, ISO 9001, that's their company. We are delivering the training internally to their senior teams using our platform. So what are we covering? Leadership, context, planning, support, questions for them, performance evaluation showing our internal auditing, and then ultimately gathering their feedback then from the team. We're speaking to the guys and the girls on the ground. So important, gathering their feedback. It's meaningful. It's not nonsensical. And then the managing director is going to jump in here and he's going to say 1 or 2 words, and then they're going to get a certificate. Think of all the clauses we've just covered by thinking like that. Effective and efficient management of your system. And it covers multiple things. We're getting all of those birds again. Comms, really important. Again, we don't usually show this stuff, internal for staff and external. That's what we've got to have. How do we communicate? Internally. So the guys, audit fundamentals. Pre-course assessment. So people are doing this when the senior team is sleeping. It's really important, but we've got all of these logs. It's all documented. There's another objective. So you can see all the objectives, all the training, all the documented information. No, not wasting any time. We are getting to effective and efficient by communicating properly, whether it's about 45 with our consultants or plans with our consultants. They can go in here and learn. Leading safely, managing. Look at all the stuff that we know when we're consultants. The weakness out there, as we know, is occupational health. We know about 130 people get killed, 135-ish a year from hammers falling on their heads, which is terrible. But as people are saying online at the minute, 12,000 people dying from lung diseases. It's not right. So we need to make sure we're focusing and aiming in the right areas. Comms, internal. Internal, there's Lisa, our department. Useful questions for anybody joining the department. Question, does your department have any set objectives? Yes, there they are. So look at this internal communication. We're satisfying these clauses. We're not even trying to satisfy them. We're trying to communicate well internally to the company. We need risk management. So the department's going to have a risk management register. Risk and issues, I should say. And out of that register is going to fall the objectives. Like we said earlier, the main things are the policy which sets this up, then the risk management element and the objectives to lead on that risk management. So we end up with good business continuity, good crisis management, and hopefully organizational and personal resilience. Remember that. That's really important. Not just organizational, we need personal resilience as well. Just checking the time, 26 minutes past. So we're doing all right. Context, what company are we? Do we know who we are? Yes, we do. Have we got good leaders? Not just managers, leaders. People who are going to motivate people, inspire people, worker participation, get everybody involved, planning, back to the risk assessments, objectives, support all of the training, the communication, like we've just covered. Right, we've got everything now, guys. Now we need to go and do a job. That's your operation. That's what you're doing. This standard is quite short on that, 8.1 and 8.2. But ultimately, if you're looking at something like business continuity, there's a lot more in here. Or the security standards, there's a lot more in here. But we do have good stuff in here. Let's have a look. Eliminating hazards and reducing risks. And that sounds like clause 6. It is. They're quite similar. Okay. In clause 6, it was about the planning. In here, the standard is asking us to eliminate hazards. We know we can't always eliminate, but it does ask us to do that. But we know we can't. Manage change management. One of the most important activities and areas where things go wrong, isn't it? Managing change. Difficult. Procurement, and my favorite, emergency preparedness and response. Are we going to have a document on that? We really should. Remember, we had that risk assessment methodology, our legal requirements. So you can see now this clause, we're actually passing half of this as well with the other stuff that we've done. So it's important to remind ourselves of that. It asks us in the standard to follow easy AP. That's that hierarchy of control that we're aware about. Okay, so it's worth understanding the elimination. We know this. I'm going to kick through it because the majority of you on here are health and safety practitioners. And ultimately, we should have heard of the hierarchy of control. The important thing is to understand there are multiple hierarchies of control as well. And some of them are actually in law. Biggest thing to take from this is the safe place and the safe person, isn't it? That's really important. The most effective versus least effective. If we're relying on people all the time, dare I say it, then ultimately something's going to go wrong. If we can protect everybody through elimination, substitution, and engineering controls, that's what we want to try to do. But we still got to rely on people, of course. They've got to travel. They've got to get off a bus somewhere. They've got to get off a plane somewhere. No, we should trust people, but ultimately, we want to protect them as much as we can. Who might be harmed and how? We're back here. Look, I changed one of these slides the other day because a very good guy on LinkedIn pointed me in a better direction. We've got to think about vulnerable people. We've got to think about vulnerable people. Really important. Remember what it's told us to do in this clause? Try and eliminate hazards. We've got to think about asbestoses. We've got to think about those pre-existing conditions, which most people don't. We've got to think. Look at the pre-existing conditions. Planning, back to clause 6, but within emergency preparedness and response, talking as well there. That's why it's all here. It's all in the same clause. Vulnerable people. What about those invisible workers? As Vincent Theobald Vega told me the other day, spot on. The invisible people. The invisible people. So important that. Cleaners, maintenance, night shift workers. Really important. Well, how are we going to do that? We're back to hazard management now. Electricity, work at height, equipment, and they go on and on and on, don't they? All right, but unless we're planning, unless we're trying to eliminate those hazards, because there's much more, we're not going to reach that standard. Management of change. I've only got 2 docs up for this, but it's a big thing, the management of change. And I just wanted to show you this. We operate with a sort of 6-step process. Step 1, flag the change. Then you have a change review to see if it's needed. Then you go for change approval. Then you information update, what's got to be updated. Then training on anything that was updated. And then how did that go? Really important. You're not going to do this for absolutely everything, but you're going to do this for the big things. And you're only going to know about those big things if you know your context and you've got a really good risk assessment methodology. So you're doing your horizon scanning. Otherwise, everybody will be filling this out every time they go and get a new barrel of water or something. We've got to put those controls in. We've got to train the guys on it. But I can tell you now, if you change your office system, Sage, to something else, or your health and safety consultant to someone else, or your PP supplier to something, you should be really thinking about that. This is an old one that I've done back in the day, a long time ago, changed the date, but this was about for a global company and their need to change and make sure all documentation across the world was the right documentation at the right time, because that's a risk. Let's go through it again, 6 steps. Flag change. Do we need it? What's it for? Legislative issues or opportunity. Change review, let's get together. Yes, we do. No, we don't. Accept it or reject it, or further analysis or accept with a recommendation. Approve, tick. Somebody signed off. Thank you very much. It's going to cost us about 10 grand. Update all your information. Change management. Train the guys. Change management. Involve the guys before you train them, isn't it? Really important. And then check that that change implication has worked. Use a form and have a log. That's what we're going to recommend. There's certainly a warning in there. Same as that warning for procurement. I'm also an auditor for ISO 28000, which used to be supply chain risk, but it's still a security standard. Hezbollah device explosions. Wow, what a supply chain risk, eh? Yeah, we've been tampering with our gear. But ultimately, think about that. That could also be critical items that you're using. So we could have suspect and fraudulent items in our supply chain. Who's checking that? Go and knock on the quality department's door. Somebody needs to be checking that. But that quality department person is probably the health and safety person and the security person all rolled up into one, aren't they? This is the issue we make sure we know what we're doing. Check your supply chains, especially if you're in construction, because you know in construction, everybody's got to know all the duties, and half the people don't understand what RAG lists are, and that's a designer's duty under the principle of prevention, hierarchy of control for Schedule 1 of the management regs, as we know. So we really do need to know we're doing our contractor due diligence. And if we bring them in as part of our service and our client is getting the service from us, but it's them delivering it, think about that. They need to be up to speed. So contractor due diligence, health and safety is all about quality, security, information security, performance evaluation as well, because all roads are going to go back to that risk assessment. And we need to be internally auditing that. Clause 9, performance evaluation. So again, we are overlapping. Emergency preparedness and response. If you've got ISO 45001, you should be doing some type of exercise and test drills. These are the ones we've done for Hunter Pack fantastically for Farm Week, where there's a lot more to this document. You can't see it all there, but ultimately we're on site scenario testing. That is a PTO, a power takeoff. And apparently when farmers get wrapped in that, they go around 9 times a second. These guys, I take my absolute hats off to them. Coming from a farming background myself, very dangerous. So me and my brother went up there. We've done a lot of work on severe and life-threatening bleeds, and we should know L74, a little bit of an update, wasn't it, back in February or March, talking about life-threatening bleeds, tourniquets, and also mental ill health in your first aid needs assessment. Records. I can't talk. When it goes wrong, this stuff happens. You do not want somebody bleeding out because they're trying to get a triangular bandage wrapped around a fork, knife, spoon, or some, I don't know. You need, if your risk assessment says there's a potential life-threatening bleeds, don't mess around with triangular bandages. Get yourself some tourniquets, get yourself some decent training, really important. 12 minutes. No, we're on 35 minutes, so we're doing all right. Context. Do we know who we are? We're farmers. Do we know who we are? We're in a library. Really important, the context. Your licensing, everything's going to be in there. Leadership, policy, objectives. Remember that? Involvement, planning. Actually, objectives are in planning, but leadership have got to go for it. Got to say we're going to set some objectives. Planning, risk assessment methodologies. Really important. Support, training, awareness, communication, documentation, going through your procurement channel, making sure there's no dubious characters in there. Operation, small clause, 1 and 2, but we've just said some of the most important things in there is the emergency preparedness and response. Because when it all goes wrong, that's all you've got, is that. Everything after this, 9 and 10, is looking back. How well did we do? How well did we do? 9 and 10 is looking back. Performance evaluation. Monitoring and measuring, evaluating compliance, internal audit, management review. Monitoring and measuring what we're going to monitor and what we're going to measure. Well, the stuff that you're doing. Don't make it up for the auditor. If you're in construction, you might be doing cube testing. If you work in a hostile environment and got armored vehicles, you might be checking the calibration tools for keeping the wheels on the vehicles. And if you've got weapons, You might be doing headspace and timing on certain weapons and things like that. What are we going to monitor? What are we going to measure? Up to us to determine it. Really important. I can't tell you 9 and 10. We're going to set ourselves up for 2025 by getting it all right, by doing really good audits. Evaluating compliance. We know that's legal and other requirements. We covered that earlier on, but this is where we get to look at it. And then the IA, the internal audit, and then the management review. So we're going to be looking for those audit schedules, those guidance, how we're going to do the audit schedules. How we're going to do the audits. And we're going to look at the findings. Really important part. Internal audit, verifiable evidence, observation, document review, and interview. And think about the management regs. Reg 5, plan, organize, monitor, control, and review your preventive and protective measures. So it's intrinsically linked. Evidence and how to gather it. We need that objective evidence. It should be verifiable where it can. Difficult sometimes. But what are the ways? Observation, document review, and interview. These are the ways of gathering evidence, similar to a workplace action investigation that we were looking at yesterday. Something good to take away from this is the horizontal and vertical audits. If you understand horizontal and vertical audits, that was quite clever, wasn't it? Then ultimately, really important to know the difference between this. And then you set up your audit program, the 6 steps to planning an audit program, and the 6 steps to undertaking an audit. It's the 6 steps to planning an audit program that is the most important. And everybody who's ever done a course with this understands that now. Doing an audit isn't that hard. Doing an accident investigation isn't that hard. Witnesses, you walk up, you start talking to people, but getting it wrong is easy. It is getting it wrong is easy. It's the planning that you do up front. And that's what we're on about, the planning. Plan. So important. There's a 3 lines of defense approach out there. You can see it in the orange book. I think it's from the International Institute of Internal Auditors in the States back in the day at some stage. Some people don't like it. I do like it. It is in the orange book, the risk management book of the government. You can download that. Talk about the first line, frontline staff. The second line, supervisors, head of health and safety, head of security, whatever it is. And then the internal audit is that function. And that's important because the first line's reporting to line management. The second line and the third line might be reporting up to senior manager. But that internal audit should be going up the top because top management should know the big issues that have been found on internal audits. So they get informed decision making, which is a requirement on making decisions, isn't it? Really important. So the 3 lines of defense, I do like, and I do follow that because we need that horizon scanning. They've got to be reading that report and we're back to the start before we end up off the rails again and in a crisis, or at least looking for that business continuity plan that we know isn't right because we didn't do a business impact analysis. So the management review, we come into the end, the management review, this is critical. Okay, you don't have to do we have a document on it? Yes, we do, again, because it guides the company. And if that person leaves the company who used to do this, nobody's going to know what the heck they're doing. So it's a really good thing to have it written down. The management system. Wrong, the management review, sorry. And in that management review, that's when you're going to look back and you're going to cover everything. You're going to pull out the audits. You're going to pull out your training. You're going to pull out your emergency preparedness. You're going to pull out your risk assessments. You're going to talk about it. Might not be all in one day. I wouldn't suggest you do it in one day. I'd suggest you split it up. And I also would suggest that various heads of department come to you with the findings from their department. So you involve all of the heads of department. So they come to the senior management team. Really important. So we're nearly there and we're on good times. I think I might have pulled this off. So we're now on improvement. So we know where we are. We've got a policy. We've got our risk assessments. Everybody's trained. We've got emergency preparedness. We're looking backwards, performance evaluation and improvement. And that's it, P, D, C, and A, isn't it? Moving forward. People try to, come up with different PDCA models. People will talk this model down, and I get it. And they're all probably right in their own space as well. But ultimately, we get to that improvement. And it's up to us then what we do with it, because that improvement should go straight back into planning for our objectives. Because everything is overlapping. It's critical to understand that. Improvement. Incident investigation sits in here. Accident, incident investigation. Do you determine Done a good course on this yesterday and a lot of good discussion on the planning, the upfront planning. If you follow 245, HSG 245, you're going to get it. You're going to get it without a shadow of a doubt. But ultimately, there's also a British standard out there as well, guidance on incident investigations, 4502, 2018, part 3, I think it is. But what is your process? And we started off yesterday by saying you're in the shower, you've had a call, right? You're going to go to site, what do you need? That's it. We get those calls sometimes, don't we? There's been an accident, right? And it's not nice at all. And we should know the certain things that we should have that guideline, that guardrail. And ultimately, we don't investigate accidents all of the time. So it's easy to come off the boil with it. We need a really good company policy, really good training, especially for witness interviews. Because if you're interviewing somebody because there's been an issue, right? There's human factors in risk assessing. There's human factors in doing work. There's human factors involved in doing accident investigations. Not just the attitude of the person, it's the attitude of us, isn't it? What we think, feel. Our emotions are going to guide our incident investigations. We've got to be clued up on cognitive biases and heuristics, our bounded rationality, and all the other heuristics that are out there, because there's loads of them as well, as we know. Cognitive bias and heuristics. A very good document, HSG 48, looks at the performance influencing factors, the job, the individual, and the organization. Often people get blamed, and all you got to do is go a little bit further, and then you can see it's actually a failure of the organization. It's a system failure. And you hope that system failure isn't systemic across the organization if you're global. Our perception and decision making in accident investigations and accident investigation is really, really important. Because we've got multiple failure types, we've got action errors, we've got thinking errors, we've got violations, as we know. And in that incident investigation, you are possibly judge and jury, which isn't great. I don't like being in that position, but ultimately someone's asking you to put pen to paper. So we really should be understanding of everything that impacts us, because we're trying to get to that improvement. Whatever style document you use to do your incident investigation, 5 Ys, 5 Ws, 2 Hs, escape points, FMEA, there's lots out there, isn't it? But really, we want to be looking, can we get to that root cause? Looking at those immediate causes, underlying causes, and then hopefully the root cause. And what we know is the root cause will be where you stop. If you keep on asking, you'll get another one, right? We're never really going to get to that root cause if we think about it. We've got to satisfy ourselves. So we're nearly there on that improvement, step 7 of 7. So that is it. We're on improvement now. And again, we've got to improve across the entire management system. We've got to have some type of documentation, some type of control measures for non-conforming work. Okay, whether that's accidents, incidents, near misses, whatever it is, it's just good to have something in place. We need it, and you shouldn't pass this standard if you haven't got documented evidence of that. We need the records. 1245, so that's it. We've walked through context, leadership, planning, support, operations, performance, evaluation, and improvement. It is an excellent standard without a shadow of doubt. 18,001 was good. This is good. Some people will look at this and think, oh yeah, ISO's trying to make money again. They obviously don't understand this standard. If you understood, and if you understand this standard, then you will have nothing but praise for it. Remember, it's not the standard, it's the people using it. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, I think they say with these standards. They're excellent. I'd far rather read this from a technical committee than read something from, I don't know, Bob Jones's time out in somewhere. I don't know. This is really important for us to get our heads around. It is a wonderful standard. Hopefully I've shown you there that it's really important not to run away with everything. If you manage your organization well, you're nearly gonna hit the standard. You just possibly got to go back in and do some audits, do some monitoring and measuring, because that sometimes doesn't happen. Management review usually doesn't happen. And if you're doing an audit, you're getting non-conformities, that usually doesn't happen. And audits of your supply chain doesn't usually happen. So if you're probably doing most things, most companies are. You don't want a massive ton of documents. You want to look back internally and work bottom up. Don't work top down. Don't get the standard and start going through. Look bottom up. What are we already doing? And then you're going to tick off a load of those clauses, not in a tick box fashion, but in a satisfying the requirement of the clause, because it's just a good thing